In a News 24 article titled Mashatile Under Pressure, Hawks, Public Protector and now SIU probe cases linked to Deputy President, journalists Cowan and Sipho Masondo provide an in-depth analysis of the mounting investigation surrounding Deputy President Paul Mashatile, focusing on his business dealings and luxurious lifestyle. We are now joined by award-winning investigative journalist Cowan to shed light on these revelations and the implications that they may have. Kyle, good morning to you. Thanks for giving us your time. I know that these investigations for News 24 anyway, really starting for you in 2023. So quite a list of things that you've been looking at. But I want to start off with what sparked the investigation in 2023 and what you found. And then we'll get into some of the newer investigations.
No, good morning, and thank you as always for having me. You know, we set about in late 2022 actually looking at Mr. Mashatile because of a series of allegations that were made at that point by a former romantic partner of his, and you know, also quite a long time ago, 2005-06, there was some reporting done by the Mail and Guardian specifically on, you know, some Gauteng government contracts and so on that were awarded to people quite close to Mr. Mashatile and his own involvement in that. And, you know, we sort of started trying to put together a picture of who the deputy president really is. Where does he come from? What was his power base like? You know, what was he up to in all the years that he was, you know, sort of in control, I want to say, of politics in Gauteng. And you know, we've obviously discovered some I wouldn't call them skeletons, maybe some fossils, because of the size of these issues in his closet. So we've always tried to, you know, just step by step try and understand who Mr. Mashatile is and why, in particular, his friends and close associates continue to do extremely well out of government business wherever he seems to have any sort of influence.
Yeah, that last bit, and I think it's an important one. And I need to say this, that we are, of course, going to be reaching out to the Deputy President's office to get right of reply. But that last bit where you say, where the Deputy President has been, his friends seem to benefit. I mean, give me examples of that.
So the most pertinent example, I would say, is his son-in-law, Mr. Naledi. He got loans from the Gauteng Partnership Fund starting around 2013. There were 3 separate loans, the last one being awarded in 2017, to build social housing, a project called Hunter Heights in Highlands North here in Johannesburg. And that project just, nothing has ever happened. Nothing has ever been built. Mr. Nonkwelo drew down on the loans that he got from the GPF to the total of just over 7 million rand. And Mr. Mashatile was at great pains early on to sort of point out, oh, but, you know, this all started before I was MEC and, you know, I didn't have anything to do with it. But while Mr. Mashatile was MEC for housing, that last biggest loan in 2017 was granted to his son-in-law's company. And Mr. Mashatile, of course, turns around and says, well, I had no influence whatsoever in the GPF making this decision and deciding, you know, the board deciding to grant this loan. But of course, what Mr. Mashatile doesn't say is that he replaced almost half the GPF board with people who are loyal to him, you know, a couple of months prior to this decision being made. So, of course, there isn't like, you know, a smoking gun that says, you know, a WhatsApp text message that says, oh, you know, I'm corrupt and I'm going to be helping my family to steal money. But there are all of these circumstances where people do benefit. And the biggest benefit to Mr. Nonkwelo is that in all of these years since, the project has failed repeatedly. The GPF has never taken any concrete steps to recoup that money.
And, you know, there's quite a few names in, I want to talk a little bit about what you found where his sons are concerned, and then we can get into that 28 million rand Cape Town mansion that, you know, has a Hawks probe also taking place.
Yeah, you know, I mean, the contracts that the public protector are investigating, for example, were awarded to a company. Now, again, it's not always clear cut. So the company, the Ndwato and Manzi Group, is it is linked to, and I'm using that word very specifically, to Thabiso Mashatile and Tanika Mvelase, who are 2 of Mr. Mashatile's sons. And the reason why I say linked to is because they were directors at one point, then they resigned, and then other people were appointed as directors. Then they were appointed again and resigned again, and they seem to still be working for the company. One seems to be the project director, the other one seems to be involved in the finances. It's not very clear, but in that time where they were being appointed and resigning, there were contracts awarded by the Gauteng Department of Infrastructure Development. And the Public Protector's Office is saying, following a complaint from the Freedom Front Plus, they are saying, well, let's investigate this because we want to make sure that there wasn't any undue influence that was sort of imparted on the department to award these contracts to the specific company.
So talk to me about the latest investigation, and it involves an informal settlement in Everton?
Yes, that's correct. Siselo Chiseka, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, informal settlement in Everton, just south of Johannesburg. So President Cyril Ramaphosa has authorized the SIU to investigate. It's a very narrow investigation, but quite important. There were supposed to be some housing units built at this informal settlement, as well as some ablution facilities. And the president has said to the SIU, please go and look at all the contracts and money that was paid after 1 April 2017 to the date of the proclamation, which is the 13th of September 2024. Interestingly, what has also been said is that you can go back and look into stuff into the past, but only if it relates to this project. So it's a very narrow proclamation. It's quite strangely worded, actually. And how I perceive this is that there are many things that need to be investigated by the department, at the Gauteng Department of Human Settlements, including with links to Mr. Mashatile and excluding of him, because of course he wasn't the only person that, was involved with that department. And I feel that this very narrow proclamation is probably a failure to actually properly try and address everything that's happened at the Gauteng Department of Human Settlements.
Yeah, interesting, because and of course not a link, but I think about the timing of an SIU proclamation gazetted, what was it, the day before we saw the Deputy President collapsing in Limpopo, and I'm not going to make the connection at all. I don't think that's an important thing to do. But I want to talk a little bit about just, I suppose, the political will to deal with some of the questions that are being raised here, right? You talk about the public protector looking into some of these issues, but what is it that law enforcement needs to be doing to show, even perhaps the President's office, to show that some of these concerns are being taken seriously?
Well, number one, when I think the president can, instead of signing such a very narrow proclamation into the SIU, authorize the SIU to investigate all of the allegations that are being made around Mr. Mashatile at the Gauteng Department of Human Settlements. The GPF loan, for example. There's another issue that we wrote about where a law firm, M&S Attorneys, in 6 years, they received 400 and something million, and 68% of that income was during the period that Mr. Mashatile was MEC. And it just so happens that Mr. Naledi Ndlovu, who is one of the founding members of M&S, is one of Mr. Mashatile's oldest friends. So, I would like a proper investigation into all of those things, because as much as the media, we can investigate and we can unearth all sorts of things, and we can unearth documents, and we can do our absolute best to shine a light on things that people don't want us to know about. But we have no powers further than that. We can tell the public what we found, which is our responsibility, but nothing ever happens further than that. There's no real action by law enforcement. The president sort of signs this proclamation that could or could not be, a shot across the bow of Mr. Mashatile politically, but there's no concrete steps taken. So we would like to see, just a proper investigation that really puts the deputy president on terms to respond to these things, because he can ignore the media. He can ignore the outcry on social media. He can ignore all the insults that come as a result of these stories, which, inevitably happen. He can just move on with his life, continue to live in his 37 million rand house in Waterfall, and not really care. And I think that shouldn't be that way.
We're going to reach out, of course, to his office. We really appreciate your time, Kyle. Thank you so much for speaking to us. So Kyle Cowan there is a News 24 investigative journalist speaking to us about what they've been looking into with regard to the Deputy President since a few years ago.